Keswick movement, England, in the last century. Keswick movement had some ideas that I don't agree with, but they also had a lot of good things. Some of the great and very familiar names of that time participated in Keswick conferences, meetings, and benefited from it. But that's a great hymn, Jesus, I am resting, resting. That was one of the things they emphasized about our relationship with the Lord, is resting in the promises of God. And that's a great truth. Today we're in Proverbs chapter 31, as I'm sure many are familiar, that we have in this chapter a great passage extolling the virtuous woman. And so in tribute to our mothers today, and we know that our moms do manifest many of the traits that are described here in this virtuous woman. And so we want to look at these things in appreciation and as a tribute to them. Beginning chapter 31 of Proverbs, verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. The beginning of this portion of Scripture asks a question. Who can find a virtuous woman? And then it goes on to make a statement that, of course, expresses the reason it's hard to find such a person, because her price is far above rubies. You know, the earth contains many geological treasures that people are always seeking to find. The value of some substance geologically is determined by its rarity, its beauty, its quality. You know, we don't tend to place a high value on a little bit of iron ore or limestone, because those substances are so very common, easy to find, and in abundance. They're not pretty, they're not rare. But many other things that we discover in the earth do meet the qualifications of rarity and beauty and quality. And men have been seeking these treasures throughout human history. You can go way back and find that people had found gold and valued it very highly. That they had found precious stones and used them to decorate their jewelry and their ornaments. Going way, way, way back. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, gold, platinum, silver. These things are hard to find and sometimes even dangerous to mine. And that, of course, is part of the reason for what a high value we place on those things. But you know, there are treasures. Treasures are not always geological in nature. Some of the greatest treasures are actually human and female. At least so says the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, as we have just read. Who can find a virtuous woman, or as some of the newer translations render it, who can find a woman or a wife of excellence? Her value is far above the value of jewels. And so the woman of excellence has all the necessary qualities for being precious: rarity, beauty, and quality. And that's what we see described here in the portrait of the virtuous woman given to us in Proverbs 31. The woman of excellence is a wife of excellence, as this passage indicates. Now, let's hasten to point out that while this passage focuses on the wife and mother of excellence, that's not in any way to be a detraction from the value of the single woman, or the woman who is a widow, or the woman who was never blessed to be able to bear children. Because many of them are also women of excellence. And we have some knowledge, both personal and historically, of some very, very great, important, and fine women whose qualities, whose service for the Lord needs to be celebrated as much as the wife of excellence and the mother of excellence that is described in this passage of Scripture. For instance, going back in history, Mary Slessor was a single woman missionary to Africa who did a tremendous work for the Lord in that continent. We are probably familiar with Elizabeth Elliot and in more modern times. Going back again in history, Amy Carmichael in India, and the wonderful work she did, particularly among orphaned girls in that country for the Lord. But you know, our church here has personal knowledge of some single women of excellence. Belinda Richter, for instance. She serves the Lord in Papua New Guinea, and along with her, Rachel Langendorfer. And we appreciate these women. They aren't married, they don't have children, but their Christian virtue, their diligence in the service of the Lord is certainly something that stands as an example to us and a beauty in the eyes of the Lord. But this passage of Scripture deals with a wife and a mother. And of course, many of the qualities that the virtuous wife and mother manifests are qualities that we want to see in everybody that loves the Lord. But we celebrate these things today as we think of our mothers. Maybe your mother doesn't quite match up or measure up to all the perfections of the virtuous woman that are given to us here. But I want you to notice in verse 29 that it says, many daughters have done virtuously. Now this one excels them, but the fact remains that many daughters have done virtuously. And so ladies, if you look at this portrait of the woman of excellence and you say, well, I just don't have all she had, don't be discouraged. The Word of God often places before us the example of people whose qualities are far superior to our own. that's not done to make us feel bad or to make us feel inferior. It's done in order to be an encouragement to us and also as an opportunity to give glory to the Lord. This morning I talked with you a little bit about John Eliot and his role as a missionary, pastor, translator. This man had amazing abilities. And to top it all off, he was a man of rare spirituality and godly devotion. A real shining light for the glory of the Lord in his day. And he continues as a marvelous example to us today. Now, I don't even come close to measuring up to a John Eliot. So does reading about him and hearing about him discourage me? No, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to encourage and to inspire us to excellence within the realm of our own abilities and opportunities. And so we talk about the woman of excellence this morning, not that we expect that any woman these days or in history is going to fully measure up to all her perfections, but to be an example. And what we see in you that is like her, for this we give praise and thanks to the Lord for his grace in your life and for the blessing that you, through these things, have been to your family. We begin in verses 10 and 11 here, 11 and 12 here, with the virtuous woman. Who can find a virtuous woman? Well, what does this word virtuous mean? You know, it's used quite often in the Old Testament, and it's not always translated the same. Sometimes it's translated by the word valor. Boaz was a mighty man of valor, the book of Ruth says. It's used to describe men of military power and skill, a warrior. And it's used also, of course, as we see here, of virtue or excellency in a person. The word most often is used to portray strength and power and ability. And that certainly is what we see in the virtuous woman. Not that she's masculine, that's not at all what we see here. But she has womanly strength and power and excellency. And so she is referred to here as the woman of excellence or the woman of virtue. Her price, her value. Well, what's she worth? Let's put her on the auction block. What can we get for her? Well, she'd be hard to buy because her value is far above the value of jewels. The word translated rubies here doesn't refer specifically to the ruby. It's sometimes used of a pearl and of other precious objects, and so we might understand this in a more general sense of jewels. She has a price that exceeds the value of jewels. Now, let's consider her first of all in reference to her husband, verses 11 and 12. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. What a blessing to have in your life a woman that you can trust, a woman that you can have confidence in. Not only confidence that she can take care of her chores and her responsibilities, but that you can trust in for her faithfulness to God and as well to you. I can't imagine living life in the way many people live their lives, in relationships in which there is no fidelity. So many relationships these days based on nothing more than a physical attraction, a common, like, that soon grows cold and, becomes boring, and then the relationship ends and eyes begin to wander and feet begin to depart, and pretty soon there's unfaithfulness that is so destructive to relationships. Horrible to live that way, I think. But to have a home and to have a wife in your life that you know is going to be faithful, that you know loves the Lord, that you know will always try to do what's right, gives a sense of confidence and assurance to a man that really helps him to be successful in what he's doing. And, of course, gives success to the home. Because what goes on between mom and dad, between husband and wife, is so important to what's being inculcated in the minds and hearts of the children. They learn so much from what they see in us and from what they see us doing. And they can see and recognize fidelity and dependability in us as parents. She's going to do him good. She's not going to be a cause of any evil in his life. And he's not going to need to be a rich man because he's already wealthy. He has a wife whose value is higher than jewels. So he really is wealthy. And to be able to trust in her is a wonderful confidence. Beginning at verse 13, we see her industry. And by the way, before I leave that point, thank the Lord for the women in our church who have been such faithful women in your homes and your marriages and as mothers to your children. These are virtues that honor the Lord and in which he is well pleased. And we applaud you for your fidelity. In verse 13, her industry. And under this heading, there are numerous things that are spoken of. Now, as we go through this, you may see some things in here to say, well, I'm no good at that, or I could never do that. Okay, none of us, has everything. But here are some things that set this woman apart in her value, her benefit to her husband and her family. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. And so she's making things out of cloth. She's making these fabrics and industriously working hard at producing things that are a benefit to her family. She's like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. I didn't know exactly what word to use to describe this quality. But here's a woman that's got some initiative about her. She's not just taking the easy course or doing what's convenient. She's trying hard to get the best and to get the most for her family. Like a merchant who seeks goods from distant places, she is diligently seeking for those things that will meet and provide for her family. Amazes me to watch women in their industry about shopping. Now, this is how I shop. I go in the store, I go right to what I want, I buy it, and I go right out of the store. You other men like that? Probably so. And so you know what happens? I don't always get the best deal. I don't always get the sale item. But that's not how it is with my wife. Now, she shops. And she clips coupons. And she does all those things that you can do to save a little here and a little there and to get the best deals. She will buy things to send to our granddaughters. And I will think, what in the world is she spending on these grandkids? But then when she starts telling me about it, she spent a couple dollars for this, and $3 for that. And because she's, been hitting the sale rack and, looking out for bargains. And when it all adds up, she really has spent very little. And I have no reason to complain because she has been careful. And so she's like that merchant ship bringing goods from afar and the effort that's being made to get a good deal and to provide. And I know you women have skills like that. And we praise and applaud you for your patience and your diligence in that way of doing business. In verse 15, her diligence is applauded. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat, gives food to her household, and a portion to her maidens. Now, one thing that needs to be observed in this description of the virtuous woman, it's obvious that she is a woman who is a woman of means. Now, not all women are, and never will be. But what you read about her in this passage, it's pretty clear that she has some resources. After all, she has maidens. In other words, she has some servants. And so she's well off enough to be able to have servants. We're getting a little further down. She buys a field. So she has the means to be able to purchase property. Now, that's not the description of many women, and never will be the description of them. They just don't have those opportunities. That's not a criticism. It's not that the woman who doesn't have the means is inferior in any way. But this woman does have those circumstances, and she utilizes them diligently. She's not sitting back and taking it easy and, just consuming the benefits of her prosperity. But she is utilizing her prosperity to minister faithfully and to be a blessing. And of course, that's a principle for all of us, isn't it? That God wants us to take whatever it is that He's given to us, and He has entrusted us with many things. He wants us to take what He's given to us and to use it faithfully, to use it diligently. And so if what you have is small, is little, well, use your little to the glory of the Lord, with diligence and faithfulness, and the Lord will reward that in a great way. But if the Lord has blessed you with much, it doesn't mean that you should just sit back and, enjoy it, but that you should use that prosperity as an opportunity to be a blessing and a help to those who are in your life. And so we see her diligence in verse 15. She's up early in the morning, still dark. She's providing food for her household, and she's taking care of her servants. To be a servant in the house of a woman of excellence is a privilege and a blessing and an opportunity. And of course, how about the children that are a part of that house? And what about the man who gets to benefit from the diligence of this woman? And I know that many of you are early risers in order to take care of the work and the responsibilities that are necessary in doing what your home needs and providing what your family needs. Verse 16, she's enterprising. She considers a field and buys it. Now, that's a surprising statement, isn't it? If my wife was going to buy some property, I would hope that she would include me in the discussion and the decision. But this woman has the liberty to act independently here and has the means to do so. And so she wisely looks at this property and she purchases it, not just to own some more land, but because she's going to use it. She's going to put it to good use. And she plants a vineyard in that land. And so there is provision and for the opportunity of more prosperity, and all for her loved ones. In verse 17, her strength. And of course, we have emphasized her strength as a part of being a woman of excellence. Her excellency is in her strength. Now, I don't know that we necessarily want to think of her, being down at the gym working out with weights, strength in that sense. Because strength many times is not just a matter of muscle, but the ability to exercise power in many different areas of life. And so she girds her loins with strength and strengthens her arms. She's not afraid of work. And she puts her hand to the task. She employs her brain power diligently in the opportunities that God gives to her. So this is no weak woman. This is a strong woman, utilizing all that God has given to her in a powerful way. She is also, and I didn't know a better word to use for this, but she is what I would call a craftsman in verses 18 and 19. She perceives that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. So here she is. She's engaged in making things. And she makes things that are quality, as is described here. She looks at what she's made. She knows she has good merchandise to sell. She's working at night. You know, her, King James says candle, but it's actually a lamp, an oil lamp. So her lamp is burning at night because she's working after dark. You know, she doesn't quit when the sun goes down. And she is engaged in the making of fabrics. That's what's described in verse 19 with the spindle and the distaff, are parts of spinning thread and parts of the loom in order to weave materials. Now, you know, for us today, we don't. You ever spun any thread? If you did, it must have been at a museum or something. You know, that's a kind of a distant thing from us. We go to the store and buy cloth. In fact, these days, very few women even buy cloth to sew clothes. They just buy them made. But in those times, the only way to have these fabrics and to be able to make nice things was to know how to make the cloth and to spin the thread. And so we see her skills here as a woman, a seamstress and a weaver, being engaged in producing goods, not only that her family might enjoy them, but that she might have things to sell as well. In verse 20, we see her charity. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. Now, you know, what we've seen about this woman already gives you the very strong impression that here's somebody who's really busy. She gets up before daylight, starts her day. She doesn't stop at sundown. She works, you know, into the night by lamplight. She's got all these projects going. She's got a vineyard. She's got things she's making to sell. She's taking care of her family. I mean, this is a busy woman. And yet, in her busyness, she has time for the poor. And so she's not overlooking people who are disadvantaged, but making efforts to also reach out and help them. She reacheth forth her hands to the needy. That's a wonderful picture, isn't it? That here she is. She's holding out her hand of help to those who need help. In verse 21 and 22, we see her preparations. She's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry, a clothing is silk and purple. She's not a last-minute person here. She's working ahead to make sure that her family has everything they need before they need it. They've got warm clothes before winter comes and before the snows fall because of her thought and her diligence in doing her work. In verse 23, we see her influence. It says, her husband is known in the gates when she sitteth among the elders of the land. When you sit in the gates of a city in biblical times, that was where the business and the governing of the town took place. This is where contracts were made. This is where decisions and policies for the city were enacted, and the elders would get together and would make decisions in the gates of the city. Well, because of this woman, her husband is known in the gates as a man of integrity, as a man of influence and ability, because her ministry in his life has strengthened him and his reputation among his peers. That's quite an interesting and an amazing thing. You look into history and you read the lives of great men, and very often you're going to find they had a very significant woman behind them. One that comes to my mind immediately is Jonathan Edwards' wife, Sarah, whose strength and abilities in the home, in the rearing of their children, and in the management of their home, freed Jonathan Edwards from many of the mundane duties of life, allowing him to focus on his writing and on his ministry. She managed the household. She paid the bills. She educated the children. She did all those things and left him alone to do his work. And so his success in many ways can be attributed to her quality and to her skills. And so she had a powerful influence. James mentioned Abigail last Sunday morning in his Bible class. Nabal's wife. Nabal means fool. That was the man's name. Isn't that something? Appropriately named. Because he was a drunk. He was a scoundrel. He was an ungrateful man. And he so provoked David that David set out to kill him and to wipe out his household. And it was Abigail's quick thinking and quick action that stopped David from doing something that was very wrong, and also served to save her own family and her own household. And so here was a woman with a lousy husband who nevertheless had a powerful influence that made a world of difference. And so it is with the women of virtue. Thank you, ladies, for the way you help us men to succeed. Make it possible for us to be able to do what our responsibilities in life demand. I was just thinking this morning with Marilyn gone, what if Marilyn didn't make it back? Oh, what a mess I'd be in. Have to do all my own laundry, my own cooking, my own housekeeping, and all the other things she does here as well as at home. I'd have to quit working in order just to keep up with the domestic stuff, that she does. Thank the Lord for her diligence that allows me to be able to do what I need to do and helps me to succeed. In verse 24, her assets says she makes fine linen and sells it, delivers girdles unto the merchant. So she's an economic asset to her home. But then beginning with verse 25, we get to the section that really talks about other kinds of qualities. We've seen her work, and her efforts, her diligence. But what about other qualities? Maybe I should have left more time for this. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She's not a woman that's known for her fashion and her adornment. Her fashion or her adornment is her strength and honor. And that is what is her beauty and her quality. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. Where does the mouth speak from? It speaks from the heart. And so when you have a person like this who speaks with wisdom and with kindness, you know that comes from a heart that's wise and a heart that is kind. Faithful and diligent to her family. She looks well to the ways of her household. She's not idle. And because of this, her children recognize her excellence, and they rise up and bless her And her husband also praises her. At least he better. You got a woman like this, you better take note and take opportunity to give thanks and to praise what she does. Men, how often do you thank your wife for supper? Or for doing your clothes, if she does them? That's probably the case in most homes. Or for how well she keeps the house. You ever say thank you for doing those things? You need to. If you don't, I trust you do. Because those are reasons to praise her. Do you praise her for her devotion to the Lord? And remark about her efforts to be a godly woman? We should be praising her. Now, there are many who do excellency, but this woman, of course, excels. But her excelling is not in her physical beauty. It's not her figure. It's not her hairdo or her fashionable clothes. Because that kind of thing is deceitful, and beauty is vain. It's at best temporary. But her godliness, her fear of the Lord, is an enduring quality that brings praise. And so we see the fruit of her hands, and we praise and reward her for her labors in the service of the Lord. The virtuous woman loves the Lord, and her love for the Lord and devotion to Him is manifested in her relationship to her husband and to her children and to her household in general. And her influence in the community and her ministry to the poor, and her efforts in matters of business and commerce and trade, all impacted by her love for the Lord, and hence her excellent qualities. Well, we see many of these things in you, and we thank God for it, and we praise you for that, even as we praise the woman of excellence. You're in her ranks, and we thank God for it. Our closing song is number 280.